Welcome inside the RxMuscle studios here in New York for another episode of Askdave, better known as #Askdave. I'm your host, Sadiq Faruqi. This show brought to you by Species Nutrition, 30-minute question and answer with Dave Palumbo. Anything from your questions on 2 weeks ago, the Olympia, last week's Arnold Spain, the upcoming Prague Pro, anything that's on your mind, diet, supplementation, training, it is all on the table. 30-minute question and answer. As we now bring in Dave Palumbo. Dave, two things on the menu to talk about right away. The first, Rich Gaspari is going to be live with on RxMuscle.com tomorrow night, special time, 8:30 p.m.
Yeah, I'm really excited to get Rich into. He's actually coming into our studio to do the interview because I like to look in people's eyes when I ask them the questions. And live with usually is a 20-minute interview show, live of course. But I think this one's going to be probably a little longer, probably more along 40 to 60 minutes with Rich, because I got a lot to ask him. He's got a great life. A lot of people don't realize that when I first started, bodybuilding, and I started reading the Muscle and Fitness and Flex magazine, Rich Gaspari was the kind of guy I was looking up to. He was like placed in second behind Haney at the Olympia, and I was following him, Labrada, Barry DeMay, Lee Haney. And those are the guys I grew up with. So it's kind of interesting that I'm kind of like a contemporary of his now. And it'll be great to get him into the studio, find out what's going on ever since his company has been restructured and he has a new owner now and Rich has a new position. So it'll be, I'm excited to get Rich into the studio and find out what's going on.
And then another bit of news, one of the big sponsors here on RxMuscle.com, Quest Nutrition, announcing their new flavor, a new seasonal flavor. It is going to be pumpkin. Now, Dave, you say you called this one.
I did. I've been interviewing Bruce, I guess, at the last couple of shows, specifically the Olympia I interviewed him at. I interviewed him at the Atlantic City show. And he mentioned, I said, what I always ask him, what's the newest and greatest stuff you guys got coming out? Because I love to try their new products. And they always send me home with a shopping bag full of potato chips, the protein potato chips and all the other stuff that they make. And he said, well, it's something seasonal. I said, I know it. You're going to come out with a pumpkin-flavored Quest bar. And he's like, I'm not saying anything. So I was right. But I have yet to get my pumpkin bar, Bruce. So I'm waiting for the delivery truck to arrive with our pumpkin Quest protein bars before they run out. Anyone out there who wants to try them, pumpkin is, by the way, one of my favorite flavors. So if anyone out there wants to try it, you better get to the Quest site and order it quickly because they're limited, I understand. It's only a seasonal flavor. Once they're sold out, they're gone.
Let's get to the questions. If you want to join in, you could join us on the Muscle Central Forum on RxMuscle.com. If you're not a member, it is free to register. You can join us on our official Facebook page. You can tweet your questions using #AskDave on our Instagram page, official_RxMuscle. Or if you're watching directly on the live stream page, you can ask on the live chat box. As we start off in the Muscle Central Forum on RxMuscle.com and check in with Banks A. Jr. 83. Dave, your show sucks so bad that I would rather sneak over to Mexico to buy my gear than smuggle them back into the U.S. by placing them in my cowboy boots. Come to think of it, that's what I do anyway. Question, can I take creatine on the keto diet? If so, can I use it mixed with Carbolyze?
When you're on a ketogenic diet, by definition, you're not eating any carbs. So you don't really want to mix the creatine with Carbolyze because that'll take you out of ketosis. Can you use creatine while on the ketogenic diet? Absolutely. Just mix it in your regular protein shake. Remember, just because you're not eating carbs doesn't mean your body's not releasing insulin. You're always releasing insulin because your body's always converting protein into carbs in the liver by a process we've all talked about before known as gluconeogenesis. So when your body creates the new glucose out of amino acids, your body has to release insulin to absorb those. So especially if you put the creatine in with like a protein shake, it'll certainly get into the muscle cells via insulin. You don't need 100 grams of glucose to stimulate enough insulin to absorb 5 grams of creatine. Trust me, put it in your protein shake, you'll be fine.
Let's go to Johnny Sock 0. Dave, your show sucks so bad that I would rather take high doses of DNP in the middle of the summer and then do cardio outside in a sweatsuit in the desert somewhere in Texas rather instead of watching this. My question is about DNP, by the way. Thoughts, doses, do high carbs or low carb while on it, cardio, no cardio, and side effects other than the obvious infernal heat. Is it liver toxic or how toxic is it overall to our system? Please educate some newbies who run into this stuff and decide to take it without knowing the risks involved.
I do not believe that anyone should take DNP. Very dangerous drug. The effective dosage is very, very close to what we call the LD50, which is the lethal dose 50. Okay, so when the lethal dose and the effective dose are that close, it's very easy to go over the edge. And when you go over the edge, you die. Not a good risk to benefit ratio in my book. Okay, how does DNP work? The way it works is when the cells oxidize fat inside the mitochondria, which are the energy-producing organs inside every cell in our body, when they start producing ATP, right before they produce the ATP, okay, what DNP does is it makes the mitochondrial membrane permeable. And what happens is electrons and energy leaks out, to put it easily, without getting too complicated. When it leaks out, it leaves the cells and leaves the body as heat, okay? The problem is DNP does it so severely, and what's the benefit of leaking this energy? Well, if you're leaking ATP before it's formed, your body has to burn more fat to make up for that ATP loss, which means you're going to burn excessive body fat. But DNP does it so severely that it heats up the cells so much that they actually can cook from within. So if you take too much of it, you actually damage your cells. Remember, I talked about this on another show. The mitochondria, the health of the mitochondria, dictate the aging process in our body. So when you have weak or debilitated mitochondria, you age quicker. So DNP theoretically is not an anti-aging, it's an aging compound. So it will age your body cells. Personally, I'd like to live as long as possible. To me, it just doesn't make sense to use this stuff. Too dangerous. There's no right way to use it. It's a crapshoot at best. And if you don't use enough of it, so you stay in the safe area, it doesn't do anything. So you might as well not put the stuff into your body. That's my 2 cents. It's one of the only drugs I've never recommended that someone take.
You're watching Askdave on RxMuscle.com, brought to you by Species Nutrition. We stay on the Muscle Central Forum on RxMuscle.com and go to our good friend PTB. Dave, this show is so bad, and you're going to want to get ready for this one. I'd rather hear Steve Blackman sing The Righteous Brothers, You've Lost That Loving Feeling, to get you to come back to MD. Dave, you think you can pull that one off?
I don't know. I'd like to actually see. I'd like to see him sing it to Kai Green, maybe.
What is your view on supplements conjugated linoleic acid, CLA, and ECGC from green tea as fat burners? And if you recommend them, how much should one take for effective fat loss?
ECGC is which is a derivative or one of the components of green tea, happens to be a good fat burner in the right dosages. And most fat burners that are worth their weight in gold have it in there. I know I have mine. I have it in my lipolyzed formulation. Talking about CLA though, this is probably one of the more controversial fat burners on the market. A lot of people have asked me. CLA is conjugated linoleic acid. It's an essential fatty acid. Actually, it's not an essential. It's a fatty acid that a lot of people believe to be essential. Okay, but it's not. They found that when they fed it to cows, okay, that they got leaner and they put on more muscle. Okay, in other words, they lost body fat, gained muscle. So they assumed that it does the same thing to humans. The problem is that cows have a very unique gastrointestinal system. They have like two or three stomachs. Think about what cows do. They eat grass and they process grass and they extract omega-3 fats out of it. So cows do different things. Humans' stomach and digestive system can't do what cows do. Doesn't have the same effect on humans. However, in our omega-lyzed formulation from Species Nutrition, we have a nice healthy dose of fish oil. We also have a very healthy dose of what's called evening primrose oil, which is a source of omega-6 fats. Evening primrose oil contains the essential fatty acid GLA or gamma linoleic acid, and it also contains CLA or conjugated linoleic acid, which is not essential, but it could also be considered a healthy fat. So, will CLA burn fat in your body and build muscle? No. Is it a relatively healthy fat to take? Yes. Is it essential? No. If you want to get a source of CLA, I would just recommend taking evening primrose oil or a supplement that contains it, like omega-lyze.
Let's go to your pal Sal. Dave, I detest your show so much that I won't mention it by name because, like the one true guru said, I'm afraid of being sued. Question, for a 60-year-old on TRT, what are the ideal levels of total and free testosterone in order to have a decently muscular physique?
Free testosterone is a weird thing because, as we get older, we have less and less free testosterone. More is bound to the binding proteins. When you have more bound testosterone, okay, even even though you may have a high total testosterone, it might not function because the free testosterone is what does things in the body. What's the ideal number? No one really knows. But, total testosterone, they say 250 to 850 is the normal range for a male, okay? I always like my at least healthy people to be in that higher range, 600 to 850. Obviously, guys on anabolic steroids are going to be over 1,000, way over 1,000. That's just the way it goes. As far as free testosterone, there's a range. The higher is the better. I've seen some people with crazy high free testosterones. As long as you're in the normal range, however, your body will respond correctly. And that's what's important. The total testosterone, however, is important because if you don't have enough around, you're not going to have enough to make enough free to actually do something. So I would try to keep your testosterone in the 600 to 850 range if you're looking for hormone replacement. Obviously, if you're a bodybuilder on anabolic steroids, it's going to be way, way higher.
You're watching Askdave on RxMuscle.com. Reminder, tomorrow night, 8:30 p.m., live with returns. Special guest, Rich Gaspari, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on RxMuscle.com. Reminder, for the best I hate this show or best I would rather be doing this than watching the show, you get Nitralized Pre-Workout by Species Nutrition. For the best overall question, given the fact that we have a buy one, get one free going on right now on SpeciesNutrition.com on this product, you will get macadamia nut oil from Species Nutrition. We move on, still in the Muscle Central Forum, and go to Suds. Dave and Sid, I hate this show so much that if I have to watch it again, I'll have to go Tanya Harding on Sid and club him in the kneecap while he's playing ice hockey. And for Dave, I'll be hiding in the bushes with a stick, waiting for you to ride by on your bicycle, lunging out like an Olympic javelin thrower, placing the stick right between your spokes, most likely more than once, because really, why cut back? Well done, Suds. Dave, we always see PCT protocols to follow for men after a cycle. Are there any PCT protocols for women to follow after cycling? If so, could you give some examples?
Well, let's understand what a PCT does. It restores the normal testosterone pituitary hypothalamus axis, meaning the hypothalamus sends signal to the pituitary to release LH-FSH. The pituitary releases LH-FSH, which stimulates the testicles to produce testosterone. That's what we want normally restored. In women, when they take anabolic steroids, they don't normally have those steroids in there, those hormones in their body. So you're not disrupting anything, essentially. Now, having high testosterone or higher anabolic hormone in the body, like even an Anavar, might disrupt the estrogen levels and might disrupt a woman's period, okay? Because her estrogen and progesterone levels get a little screwed up. But you don't have to do anything to restore that. As soon as you withdraw the anabolic steroids, the woman's system will naturally turn back on. Usually it takes anywhere from a month to 3 months. Now, women who have gone maybe long periods of time on steroids who come off and they don't get their cycles, sometimes doctors will put them on the pill, to balance out their estrogen and progesterone for a few months to induce a period. But usually most women, I've seen women who've been on a long time, they come off the stuff and their body restores itself. So there's really no crash with a woman, only with a man.
Let's go now to our Facebook page. Again, our official Facebook page of officialrxmuscle.com. We go to Danny G. Dave, what does T2 do to the body?
We've talked about thyroid hormone being thyroxine or T4, which is what we call inactive thyroid hormone. That is the hormone that your thyroid gland releases. Once in the bloodstream, your body will convert the T4 into the active thyroid hormone known as T3, or triiodothyronine. Once inside the cells, however, the T3 can convert to T2, okay, which is a diiodothyronine, which is another thyroid metabolite, which they believe is the part of the thyroid hormone that actually metabolizes fat, which is responsible for the fat metabolism in the body. Many years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, you were actually able to sell T2 as a supplement. I remember I had it back in years ago in one of my lipolyze formulations while it was still was still legal, and it actually worked really well at fat burning. However, they wound up classifying it as a drug, and we had to pull it out of the formulation. However, it does have some good fat burning properties. Now, if you believe the science behind it, theoretically, it only burns fat, whereas T3, okay, metabolizes fats, protein, and carbs equally. Now, the reason why you don't lose muscle while most bodybuilders take T3 is because they take it with clenbuterol, or they take it with growth hormone, or with steroids, and those preserve the muscle tissue, what we call protein sparing effect, so that you only metabolize fats and carbohydrates. But T2 is a good fat burner in and of itself if you can still get it.
You're watching Askdave on RxMuscle.com, again live with Rich Gaspari tomorrow night, 8:30 p.m. EST, right here on RxMuscle.com. We now go to our Instagram questions. Again, our official Instagram handle, official_RxMuscle. We go to Rocky2 Jr. Dear Dave, do you think anyone will ever beat Phil Heath, or do you think he will win more Olympians than Ronnie and Lee did?
You know, it's an interesting question because Phil Heath is certainly not of the caliber of a Ronnie Coleman or a Lee Haney or even a Dorian Yates for that matter. However, he exists in a time period where he is the best, and there really doesn't see anyone. I don't see anyone on the horizon aside from Big Ramy who could really knock this guy out of his chair, so to speak. So unless Ramy, amps up his game and brings the goods that we know he's capable of bringing but hasn't yet done, I think Phil can maybe break the record. He's got 5 already. He's only got 3 more to go. He's still a young guy. He's only like 33 or 34. So he's, it's conceivable that he can get 8 or 9. It would be boring, to say the least, if there's not anyone who's going to come along in the next, 2-3 years who could actually beat this guy. But, that's Phil's legacy. Let's see if he can do it. If he comes in off again next year at the prejudging like he did this year, that's not going to bode well for him with the judges. But once again, unless there's someone in there who can really knock him out, he still may win, and that's what's been happening these last couple of years. So it's hard for me to make a prediction, once again, because we never know who's going to show up in shape. But if Ramy does hook up with Chris Osito, as it seems like it's going to happen right now from what I'm hearing from Chris and from Ramy, I think that he has a good shot at possibly challenging Phil next year.
Let's go to Epi_Muscle. Hello, Dave. I hate your show so much that I would rather be locked in a room listening to Kai Green tell us why he couldn't compete in the Mr. Olympia while George Farah is at the door knocking, trying to open the door and explain how his athletes train hard, and Kai Green is one of the hardest training bodybuilders out there. My question is, how dangerous is T3 Cytomel? He puts quotes around it. I hear a lot of people say to be careful with it, but I can't seem to understand why thyroid hormone would be any more dangerous than another one.
Well, thyroid hormone is not dangerous if it's used, responsibly. If you take too much of it, however, it can cause heart arrhythmias because it speeds your metabolism up too fast, and it's been known to cause irregular heartbeat. Now, I knew a guy who was taking what he thought was 50 micrograms a day of Cytomel, which would have been a reasonable dose, and he was taking 200 micrograms a day of Cytomel because they were dosed incorrectly, or was reading something wrong, and he was getting palpitations, and he was getting flushed. He couldn't sleep. He had anxiety. Luckily, he didn't die, the guy, and he was, they realized what was going on. I think he actually called me, and I think I figured it out. But the bottom line is that thyroid is a medication, and it can be dangerous if too much is taken. You never want to start with more than 25 micrograms per day, and you only want to increase it by 12.5 microgram increments every couple weeks. So, and you never want to go over 100 micrograms per day. So if you stick within those parameters, you shouldn't have any problems.
Let's go to Dr. Absi Cool. Dave, your show sucks more than Kai Green's drama and Mr. Olympia. My question is, can you explain the details? The beat regimen for post-psychotherapy. I don't know what he means here. The beat regimen for
best regimen.
Oh, okay, there you go. Best regimen.
I know internet talk. I've said this before. I probably get the most questions about PCT. People are post-psychotherapy. People are just obsessed with it. I don't know. They don't know what to do. They're so stressed out about it. It's not that hard. Post-psychotherapy is geared at turning back on your pituitary gland and turning back on your testicles. Okay, the only way to do that, number one, is to get rid of estrogen, because estrogen shuts down the whole process. Okay, when you withdraw the anabolic steroids you were taking, obviously they were suppressing the pituitary and hypothalamic function. Once they're removed, theoretically everything should turn itself back on. But sometimes the hormonal systems are a little sluggish, so we like to give them a little kick in the butt, so to speak. So a drug like HCG mimics the hormones LH, or luteinizing hormone. You give that to the body at 2,000 IUs every third day for maybe 5 shots. What that'll do is it'll force the testicles to start producing testosterone. So now they're producing testosterone. While this is going on, you want to take an anti-estrogen because you don't want that new testosterone to convert to estrogen because that shuts everything down again. So usually I have guys stay on a 0.5 milligram of Arimidex every other day. Now, once those 5 shots of HCG are taken, you can now turn the pituitary gland back on. The way you do that is you take Clomid or Nolvadex. It's an estrogen receptor blocker. I like Clomid better because I think it really has a stronger pituitary effect. It blocks those receptors a little better. Once the estrogen receptors are blocked on the hypothalamus, now that it will start cranking out gonadotropin releasing hormone, which will then stimulate the pituitary to release LH and FSH, which then gets the whole system working again. So that HCG with the estrogen blocker, with the Clomid, and the Clomid should be used for 2 to 3 weeks at 50 to 100 milligrams per day. That usually is the best PCT. I've been using it for years, and it never seems to fail.
Dave, Big Dawes 14 wants to know, what do you feel about SARMs like Ostraine?
SARMs, no one even talked about SARMs, for many, many, many years. They've been around for a long time. They're actually prescription drugs in Europe. And the way what they stand for is selective androgen receptor modulators. It's just a fancy way of saying it's a drug that stimulates the nucleus of the muscle cell to produce more protein. Kind of similar to what steroids do, without the steroidal component of them. The problem is that when you compare the weakest anabolic steroid, Anavar, to a SARMs, the Anavar is probably 10 times more potent. So SARMs are not really going to do anything for guys that cycle steroids. However, if you're a natural lifter and you don't use any anabolic aids, you put some SARMs in your program, you might get a little bit more muscle growth. I've seen some guys get some decent results from it. And once again, it's an individualistic thing. Some people get better results than other people. The good thing is that there's no sex-linked steroidal side effects to these things, so women can take them as well. But once again, don't expect miracles. The stuff is not that strong.
Let's go to _Melon Marty. Dave, why did you stop pursuing your pro card?
Because I've said this before, I felt I reached a point where I couldn't get any better. I had shoulder issues. I felt that I had maximized my physique, and I felt that, at this point it was counterproductive to continue doing more of the same, because if I couldn't be better than I was the year before, then I never wanted to compete. That's how I knew would be my time to stop, when I knew I couldn't be better. And I couldn't be better, so I decided instead to take a different direction. I wanted to start my own supplement line. I was at the time I was reporting on my own website. Then I wound up getting hired by Steve Blackman. So everything kind of happened opportunistically, in a sense that just as I kind of lost the desire to compete because I felt like I couldn't, and all these other opportunities kind of presented themselves, and I kind of just ran with it. It no longer became a passion of mine anymore. When you lose the passion for something and it's time to move on, if you stick with it, it's counterproductive. And so I kind of followed my intuition and just moved on to the next stage.
You're watching Askdave on RxMuscle.com. Reminder, tomorrow night, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we're going to be joined by Rich Gaspari, all-new special episode of Live with 8:30 p.m. right here on RxMuscle.com. We go to Neo Near. Dave, can you build muscle using keto, and will it change my amount of carbs and timing? Also, where can we find your products in Las Vegas?
Well, when you mention the word ketogenic diet and carbs and timing, they kind of don't really go together, because when you're on a ketogenic diet, you're not eating carbs. Now, if you're talking about can you grow in a lower carb diet, which wouldn't imply you're in ketosis, but it would be a low carb, high protein, moderate fat, low carb diet. Yeah, you can. Of course you can. If you give your body enough nutrients and you don't over exercise and over burn carbs. Now, if you're going outside and you're mountain biking for an hour a day, you're going to need carbs in your diet because you're not going to grow otherwise. If you sit at a desk all day and you go to the gym and train for an hour a day, you probably can get away with 100 grams of carbs a day, maybe even 75 grams of carbs a day, as long as you're eating enough protein and fat. Remember, it's the protein and fat that build and repair muscle. The carbs are the fuel source to fuel your daily activities and your gym work. If you don't eat enough carbs to fuel those daily activities, your body will dip into the protein and the fats for fuel. And then you're not going to have enough fat and protein to build and repair muscle. So it's a tricky business building muscle on a low carb diet. It can be done, but you're not going to maximize. I like, in an off-season scenario, to give guys carbs to make sure the fat and protein I'm feeding them is used maximally to optimize muscle repair and building, obviously.
Oh, you wanted to know where he can get your products in Las Vegas.
I know that it's sold there, and to be honest with you, I don't know specific names of stores, but I guess we can find out and post it somewhere. I'll have you do that, Sid. Sid, our marketing director, will post.
So new and near, email me and we'll get an answer for you in Las Vegas. We now move to stealth.nutrition. Hi, Dave. My wife and I are trying to conceive, and I've been off of everything for about 4 to 5 months, taking Clomid and HCG as well. I was wondering if HGH would impede on fertility or affect it in any way. Thanks in advance, and again, your show is horrible.
Growth hormones should not affect fertility. When I was trying to get my wife pregnant, which worked, thank God. I went off everything. I didn't want to take anything because I was just afraid, who knows what's going to interrupt anything, and I wanted to maximize the ability to do it. But growth hormone really shouldn't have any effect on the pituitary whatsoever. I know it's produced from the pituitary, but it doesn't have a sex-specific action in the body. So it's like I just wouldn't go crazy with it. But I think that as long as you're on the key is the HCG. To be honest with you, you want to take 2,000 units every other day. If you're taking it once a week, it's not going to do enough. Every other day, 2,000 units until you get her pregnant.
Let's go to tflex_17. I hate this show so much. I'd rather listen to Greg Valentino rant looking for insightful information. My question to you is, of all the current up-and-coming guys we did and didn't see at the Olympia, who do you see being a future threat to the Olympia title? I personally think Justin Compton has huge potential to be Mr. Olympia in the next 5 to 7 years tops, given what he's been able to achieve by the age of 26.
He's got tremendous potential. There's no doubt about that. I was very impressed with him 2 years ago at the Orlando Europa show when he won that show in very convincing fashion. He was good this year at the Arnold, not as good I thought as he was the year before. Can he win the Olympia? That's going to be tough. I don't know if he can be a Mr. Olympia champ. I know he's young. Obviously, he's got that working for him. But Ramy is young, too. Ramy's only 29, 30 years old. I think Ramy is probably the best up-and-comer in his late 20s, early 30s, that could conceivably win the Olympia. I think that if he pulls it all together, it's slam dunk, and he's going to win it for years and years and years. I don't know if Justin Compton will have enough wow to do that. But it's exciting to know that there's some people out there that actually potentially can win the Olympia.
Let's go to James Copesel. Dave, any advice on pumping up before stepping on stage as a bodybuilder? Muscles to target, muscles to avoid. I know too much of a pump can blur lines.
I used to do a lot of pumping up. I never pumped my legs up because I remember someone told me never do that because it kind of kills the definition in them. But I used to do push-ups. I would do flies. I remember being backstage at the 94 Suburban Championships in New Jersey. Gary Stridham was guest posing. I was completely he looked so good. I was so jacked up just to be backstage, pumping up with him, that I was doing the dumbbells that he was doing, and obviously I shouldn't have been. They were like 50-pound dumbbell. I was doing flies with him, and I actually almost tore my pec completely off its muscle. I pulled my pec, and I was so mad that I did that. I was like, what the hell am I doing backstage pumping up like this? It doesn't even matter. That after that, I never pumped up again. I found that if I just went backstage and I knew I was in shape, all I'd do is go through my poses, through my posing routine, and just the act of posing pumped me up plenty. And I always gave that advice to people because so many people pump up so long that they're so fatigued by the time they get on stage, they can't even perform.
He's got another good question here, James Copesel, and it's a very relevant topic lately. Dave, lots of talk about growth guts lately. In your opinion, in true cases of growth gut, is this reversible?
I think so. I do. I think a lot of, when you talk about growth gut, a lot of it has to do with the fact that the person's overly muscled, number one. They have a short torso, so there's less space to distribute all this muscle on. And it's because they're holding excessive water and or they're not taking a good fiber supplement like Fiberlize to get that extra waste out of their stomach because they're eating so much food. And once, I had definitely bad abdominal distension at one point in my career. It got better towards the end of my career because I started discovering taking a fiber supplement. And then when I lost a lot of that muscle, my stomach completely flattened out. And so, and I stopped eating as much food. So, it definitely is induced by what you're doing to your body. It's not really a permanent growth of any kind. What happens is the abdominal muscles get really distended. The intestines are always filled with food. And everything gets stretched out down there. And it's just, as long as you're not fat, everything's got to just go back to normal. And it takes a couple of years. It took me like 3-4 years before my midsection became flat again. So I think anything you do to your body is mostly reversible. Even the heart, they say, when it gets enlarged can be reversed because it's a muscle. And it will detrain itself if you allow it to.
Time for about 2-3 more questions. Go to Rob G _PT. Dave, this show sucks so bad I'd rather sit and listen to BPAC rant on about how his training methods are the best, yet he's not for me, Mr. Olympia. All right. My question is, why do you feel there aren't many British bodybuilders on the scene anymore? Regardless of Flex Lewis, the British bodybuilders look crap compared to everyone else. Why do you feel that is? I mentioned no names, but one at the Arnold Classic this weekend looked awful.
I'm assuming, you meant the Arnold in Europe. There's good British guys. There's not so good British guys. Dorian Yates won the Olympia 6 times. Ernie Taylor was another great British bodybuilder. There's a lot of guys out there that are up and coming who've won the British Championships the last couple of years. I'm working with one specifically that I think is going to surprise a lot of people in the coming years. So there are guys out there that are good. What about Sean Tavernier is great. It's a small country. You're not going to get a hell of a lot of guys out of there. But if you're getting a couple top echelon guys, that's impressive to me. So I think, if anything, in England, in the UK, bodybuilding is still very important to that culture. They love the bodybuilders. They're into the hardcore training. It's not so much about men's physique over here as it is in the United States. So I think probably 5 years from now, you might get better bodybuilders coming out of the UK than it's coming out of the United States, because everyone in the United States wants to be a men's physique champion nowadays.
Let's go to Strained and Gained. Dave, I hate this show so much I'd rather die in a sea of Kai Green's gypsy tears. For diabetics such as Ant Bales, Ronnie Brockel, and Jason Poston, how do they peak for shows? I'm guessing their exogenous insulin use is quite different. Could you explain?
When you take insulin, or you're an insulin-dependent diabetic, that means that every carb you put in your body you have to account for with an appropriate amount of insulin you have to inject. And these guys know, through trial and error, through working with people who are in the know, how much insulin they need to use. And I guarantee you a lot of these guys do not carb up heavily. Because when you take a lot of carbohydrates, you have to take a lot of insulin. And when you take a lot of insulin, you hold a lot of water. I've talked to Jason about this. Jason gingerly carbs up so that he can seriously and accurately control the amount of insulin he has to take, and he doesn't have to worry about a water bloat. The other problem is that exogenous insulin that you're injecting doesn't work properly, and it's hard to take control of your blood sugars when you're dehydrated. So when you start you can't restrict water too much or take too many diuretics, or then you can't control your blood sugar, and then you get a diuresis, and then all hell breaks loose. You could ask Jason Poston; it happened to him once before. So moderate carbing up, moderate dehydration. That's the best way to go for a type 1 diabetic.
Time for a couple more questions from Farabi _K. Dave, assuming Big Ramy will be working with Chris Osito, what in particular do you expect to see as far as improvements and differences?
I think that he'll be more conditioned, and I think that's really all that we've ever been wanting from Ramy. He's got all the size he needs. All he's got to do is be conditioned. And that means you have to have a contest prep guy who understands that not everyone's body works the same way, and someone who could be a detective like a Sherlock Holmes and figure out what the right way to peak the guy is. You can't just say, more carbs, less cardio, and have it work for everyone. It doesn't work for everyone, even big genetic freaks. Ramy doesn't need a lot of food, and you know what? If you feed him little bits of food, he still stays big, but he'll get more conditioned that way. So I think that Chris will be able to bring him in conditioning-wise the way he needs to be be judged by the judges at his best. Because they're not going to reward him for coming in less than his best.
Final question. Let's go to Hoodman521. Dear Dave, your show sucks. Is there any truth to Bodybuilding.com sponsoring Lee Thompson's big championship in March down in Houston? He says it has already happened.
I really don't know, because I don't talk to Bodybuilding.com, but from what I hear, at least on the street, I hear that Lee Thompson gave Bodybuilding.com a free sponsorship, maybe because he felt that there was some sour grapes there with the Bodybuilding.com not being involved with the Olympia. I don't know, but I haven't heard that Bodybuilding.com has put up any money of their own. I hear that Lee gave him that, and that would be a good move on his part, because to make himself look like he's associated with Bodybuilding.com adds some kind of degree of authenticity, I guess. If it's just window dressing, it'll come out and it'll be a one-shot deal. I don't know. It's hard for me to give answers when I don't have a clear definition of what's going on. However, I do believe in the next couple of weeks we're going to start to see who these people are who are siding with Lee, even though they're playing coy right now. And, we'll see where the line in the sand is drawn. The bottom line is that, I was always the guy that wanted to compete with the best in the big pond, so to speak, with the best organization. I don't want to be the champion of the losers. That's how I thought about it. And even when I would compete in bodybuilding shows, they always had a novice division. I never did the novice division. I always did the open division because I said, well, why am I going to compete with those guys? I got to beat the open guys if I'm going to move on to the next level of competition. So that's just the way I think, and I think a lot of bodybuilders out there want to be the best. But then there's people that just I know guys that would rather win a show that no one was in their class and they just got the trophy so they can go home and show people that they won. That's not me. So, Lee will find a niche for himself with people who maybe are disillusioned by the bodybuilding organization, who feel like they shouldn't have placed last and they want to compete, and that's great, and that'll give those people a place to go. And then the people who are the elite level athletes will stick with the IFBB and NPC, and life will go on, so to speak.
That's going to do it for the Ask Dave portion of the show. Suds from the Muscle Central Forum. Email me, sid@speciesnutrition.com. You win the best I hate. You will get Nitralized pre-workout by Species Nutrition. Dave, let's get a decision on you about the best overall question. One was from James Copsel asking you about pumping up backstage before getting on stage, muscles to target, muscles to avoid.
I like the DMP question. I remember the question I liked.
All right,
that asked was the best question?
The DMP question. I think that was early on in the show, right?
Yeah.
Trying to see who asked that. The DNP question. Who asked the DNP question? That was early on in the show, I believe.
It was very early. The second question, actually.
DNP.
Whoever had the DNP question, Sid.
Johnny Sock Zero. I love the name.
That, yeah.
Johnny Sock Zero. Email me, sid@speciesnutrition.com. You will get a bottle of macadamia nut oil. It's going to do it for Ask Dave tomorrow night. Live with returns. All new episode. Rich Gaspari, 8:30 p.m. right here on RxMuscle.com. For Dave Palumbo, Johnny Styles, I'm Sadiq Faruqi bidding you good afternoon.